episode 4.5. That's season 4, episode 5 of the Huns Oldcast. It's March 13th, 2023. And this is going to duplicate as a Huns history episode as well. I've got two old timers with me, almost as old as me, Kirk Tate and Luis Weezy Sanchez. Gents, how you doing?
Doing all right, man. But no one's almost as old as you, Bill.
That's what my daughter keeps telling me all the time. Both my daughters, actually. I wanted to do something today to document a period of Huns history that I think is really important. For the youngsters out there, the Huns were D1 from 72 to 73 is the real year the Huns started, whatever our T-shirts say. That's another story. But from 73 to 80, Huns were D1. There was only D1 in Texas. And then rugby was getting bigger, and there were problems with some of the lower level teams just getting pounded. So the TRU split into the first division and the open division, what would later become the second division. And the Huns were kind of in I'd say the 45th percentile. We weren't at the bottom of the table, but we weren't at the top either. And we got dropped into the open division. I'd say that first part of Huns history, we were a 500 club. We'd knock off one big team every year. We'd do well in tournaments. And then in 83, the Huns, our second year in the playoffs, did very well. We were one pass away from winning the TRU and then had a great party in Shreveport. Huns went up and down for a while. And fast forward to 81, 82, and Kirk, you're the coach now, and Weezy, you're playing. You've graduated college. You're playing. And you guys had a rough season and then a series of really great seasons that led us going back to D1 after whatever the math on that is, something like 27 or so years. So, Kirk, why don't you talk about that bottom when things were really lean? And then I think we had an undefeated season about after that. We won TRU after that. Just talk about that resurgence.
Well, I'd been coaching University of Texas, and I came over to the Huns as assistant coach to Terry Stevenson in the fall of 2001. And by the middle of the spring, the club was really, really struggling. We were getting down to about 10 or 12 people at practice. We were practicing in the outfield of a youth recreation center softball field in East Austin. It's all gentrified now, but it was still rough around the edges back then. And at Metz Recreation Center. And we were dead last. The B side pretty much melted away. And I got a call from Tom Kenny, TK, who said, hey, Terry Stevenson had some other things going on, some conflicts and scheduling issues. He was not able to make all the trainings. And Tom Kenny called me up and he said, hey, some of the guys were talking and we wanted to know if you'd be interested in taking over as the head coach. And first thing I did was call Terry and say, hey man, I got this phone call and I don't feel comfortable, having these conversations. And he said, no, Kirk, man, look, I got a lot going on. Thank you for calling me. Run with it, go on. And we sort of at that point, I brought the guys that we had together and basically said, hey, okay, look, the 02 season is over. We're going to start playing the preseason of 03 right now in the spring of 02. And we really sort of set our sights on the Austin tournament that year and, building up and having a good showing in the Austin tournament, which we were able to do.
For these kids, Austin tournament was a 15s-a-side tournament.
Yeah.
In the spring back then. It wasn't sevens.
Yeah, Zilker Park in April, and it would be 60, 70 teams, 2 days. You'd play 20-minute halves. You'd play 2 or 3 games on Saturday, a couple games on Sunday. And we did real well in that. And that really sort of, built it up. And then the second thing we did is for summer sevens, for years, the Huns weren't really focused on playing sevens as the Huns. They'd have various teams. Ty Landry and Ken Hudson and I did a Austin area summer sevens side when we were coaching UT, and then there's a group of Huns called themselves the Sopranos and would enter tournaments. But really, the best Huns players didn't play sevens for the Huns. And so the other thing that we did is we decided that we're going to try and get all our best players on the field and play for the Huns as the Huns in summer sevens as a way to build us into, changing the culture.
Weezy, so dead last in that 01-02 season, and then you guys started rebuilding. Why don't you talk about that for us a little bit?
I mean, it's basically what Kirk just said. And I mean, I remember going out to trainings, and, to me, I was new. I had just gotten here, played that season without Kirk for Terry Stevenson. And, being 22 years old, just moved here from El Paso, you're not really in tune with what's going on or what's happening. So, to me, I'm just happy to be playing rugby. I first got here and found us through the paper, and that was it. So, just playing rugby was enough for me at that moment. Sure, you want more and all that, but, coming from UTEP, which was also kind of dicey, oh, you know what? UTEP folded the year I left, I believe. Yeah, in 2000. So, also a dying program. It's back up and running now. But, that's sort of what I knew rugby was, and so, Kirk came in and really started, asking us questions and, pushing us to be better.
For what it's worth, I had a bicycle stolen at that practice facility out of my car in the day. So yeah. I know that facility very, very well back in those days. So
that's Kirk, how I used to get to training.
From last to a much improved season the next year. This is the next year, the 02-03 is the undefeated season.
Yeah, undefeated regular season. Yeah.
Talk about that a little bit. Worst to first.
Yeah, well, we started out the season. First thing I did is I had a team meeting. We all met in, I think, the pool house at Eric Sanchez's apartment complex. And Eric had agreed to be my assistant coach. And basically I had a form, had everybody fill out, and the usual stuff, what position you play, where, what's your experience, all that kind of stuff. And then I asked, give me one position you've never played that you want to play, that you'd like to play before you retire. And then just had a discussion about our goals and, what do you guys want to do? What is it that you want to get out of rugby, and try and get everybody on the same page. And the interesting thing was, I was coming in as a guy who, most of those guys knew me as someone who'd played a decade for the Blacks. So they didn't know that I'd played for the Huns in the early 80s. They looked at me as a Black. And when I came in and was talking about, hey, we can be competitive and, we can set some high goals, some of the guys were like, well, but what if we're as good as we're ever going to be? What if this is as good as we're ever going to get? And I just said, man, I don't believe anybody in this room is as good as they can possibly be. I don't think anybody here is out of room to improve. And, so that was the first thing, was just getting guys to believe that what I was suggesting, what I was asking, wasn't unrealistic. And then the second thing I did is I wanted to set a new standard in. And so I called up Mike Engelbrecht, who was the head coach of the Harlequins, the Super League Dallas Harlequins at the time. But I knew from my days playing with the Blacks and playing against him.
I'm pretty sure I played against him too. He was around forever.
Yeah. Yeah. And he's coaching the Quins now. But I said, hey, Mike, I need a high level game to sort of show these guys what the standard is. And I know it's not going to help you very much, but I really need a high level game against some of your best guys. And, and we'll come to you, but we'd like to do this. And that he was more than happy to help. He understood what, fellow coach, he understood what I was going for. So we wound up playing a preseason game against the Harlequins for a decade. When you say Weezy, he was a regular fixture.
Easy.
And then the other thing I did is I said, we used to play the Golds. I said, we don't play the Golds anymore. I said, we're going to play the Blacks. Yep. And they said, oh, well, hey man, we'll get killed. And those early on we did, we got killed. And we used to joke about it was Quins week or it was Blacks week. And we'd have the Black Plague and the Quinn flu. And, oh man, I don't know if I can make it. I'm not feeling very well. And, but the idea was just to say, hey, these guys are human. They're just rugby guys, and people were making them into something in their heads that they really weren't. And slowly, we got closer and closer and closer and closer over the years to being competitive. Then we started winning games, and and just sort of changed the idea of what we were trying to be.
You had to play what good was to see what good was.
Yeah. And guys had to get the sense of, hey, we lost, but that guy I played against, he wasn't all that. I could do that. And, Weezy sells himself a little bit short because, I moved him to fly half. He was a fullback, and the fly half that we'd had in 0102 moved for work. And I said, hey, you got to play fly half. We don't have anybody else. You're the only one who sees the field. We got guys who are fast. We got guys who can run or tackle or pass, but we only have one guy who actually sees where the space is and sees the patterns as they're developing. And, and it was there was a learning curve, but man, I don't know that we'd have gotten anywhere without Weezy, stepping into that spot as the decision maker on the field.
Let me tell you how that happened. So we're at, I believe it was the sevens tournament at Alamo City's pitch.
Sounds right. Yeah.
Yeah. And this was, Pear had just moved. So we're just starting the seventh season. We get there and, I think, what's his name? Steve Watt.
Yeah, the Aussie.
Right? South African.
Oh, yeah. South African,
yeah. He kind of started playing with us a little bit. And so, the position kind of automatically went to him a little bit. It's like, sweet. But I think his fitness let him down and stuff like that. And Kirk, I think, had just been seeing and is like, hey, Weezy, I need go ahead and do it this game. So, obviously I got on, and as the match goes, I mean, everything's just moving way faster than I ever seen it happen, and plus not just that, I'm having to make decisions, call plays, run the plays, all this shit, and man, after the game, I was just so uneasy, and I think Kirk and I walked aside, and I just started bawling, crying, like just tears coming down.
I can't do it. Yeah.
And this is so hard.
All you young kids that Weezy is yelling at the fields right now, you remember this story.
Yeah. And, I think I just needed that cry, and Kirk just saying like, mate, it gets easier from here on out. And,
well, you're what we got, man.
Yeah. That was basically
You're what we got.
Like, you're what we've got. And I was like, all right, I'll give it a go. And you know what? The rest of the tournament got better and better. And then that summer really helped. And by the time 15th season came around, poof, it was all good.
Really, a lot of it was just convincing guys
right
that how good they could be. It wasn't that they weren't capable players. They just didn't.
Was there still a Houston tournament back then?
Yeah.
So y'all had a good summer sevens. You played the Quins, and then that fall you started the undefeated season. And back in those days, you played a fall and a spring season with the Houston tournament at the end of the fall, and the Austin tournament at the end of the spring.
Well, and
that's
there was
a huge turnaround in a really short time, Kirk.
Yeah, we went to Cowtown to start off the season up in Fort Worth every year. That people called the Vietnam of rugby because it was still just blistering hot and a ton of games in 2 days, and everybody is out of shape because they've been sitting around all summer. And but one of the things is that the cup season was structured very differently. I mean, you mentioned all these tournaments: Cowtown, Houston, Austin, South Texas Invitational, the Stitt tournament. Went to all of these tournaments, and we played a lot of friendlies. But the cup season was only 6 games. There were only 4 teams in our bracket of D2, and we played them home and away. And then you played just as much rugby as you do today, with a 10, 12 game season, but it was structured differently with
with the tournaments.
Well, I should say you play the same number of weekends,
right?
But you have just a different rhythm to it. And in a way, I think the way we play now is a lot better for a mature team like the Huns are, where you're playing, a full schedule, 10, 12, hard 15s games. But back then, when you're trying to turn a group around and you're trying to get a whole bunch of new people and get them integrated and build a dynamic, a team dynamic and a feel for one another, and give people opportunities to grow, those tournaments, those festival type environments where you play 4 or 5 games in a weekend, 20-minute halves, and you could really roll subs in and out. It was really an effective way to grow a new team. Which in effect, coming from 10 guys, we were growing a new team.
Not to mention the rugby festival type atmosphere with all those teams and playing teams that you never played before. We played the Royal Air Force from England once in the Austin tournament. So Weezy, you guys went undefeated that season, but got knocked off in the TRUs, right?
That's my understanding. Yes. I believe Foliaki's team, right?
Yeah.
Was that his name?
Yeah, it was Arlington.
Yeah. Big boy, man. Massive. But just really nice dude, though.
But the real capstone though was that final game of that undefeated season, of that cup season, because we went so Baton Rouge was in our league, and they always wanted us to go to their Baton Rouge Mardi Gras tournament, but we weren't going to make 2 trips to Baton Rouge in the same year. So we made a deal. We said, look, I tell you what, we'll play our away match against you at your Mardi Gras tournament. We'll play that as the first game of the day at like 9:00 in the morning on Saturday. And then our B side will just go ahead and enter the tournament and play, in the tournament after the A's have played the game. And so we rented a bus. We had 50, 60 people on the bus, all sorts of great stories and nicknames from that trip. And we took the road trip to Baton Rouge, and we played the game that morning.
We had a caravan following the bus.
We did. We had a ton of people. It's a huge trip. It was awesome. And we got there and we got warmed up and got all the supporters lined up to make a tunnel for the guys to run onto the field, and I heard somebody in the park go, man, these guys really got their shit together. And which a year earlier, no one would have ever said that about the Huns. You know? And we went on, and it got down to the end of the game, and we were down 21-15, and they have a scrum inside our 22, and we took it against the head and attacked up the blind side, full length of the pitch. And this Canadian kid, Nathan Reese, was playing for us, scored it in the corner. And then TK, who's a guy who, called me up asking me if I would consider taking over head coach a year earlier. It's almost exactly a year later. TK was our playing number 8 and was our kicker. And he lined up that conversion from the sideline, slotted it at the death, full time. We won that game 21-22 and completed an undefeated regular season. And it was just, it's one of those moments. All of us who played rugby long enough have, maybe 2, 3, 4 of those moments in our career where you're like, man, that day was such a good day. And that was one of those days that was just, a magic day.
We went to the Mardi Gras tournament one year when I played, and I've got some great stories. I love that tournament. The next year, we didn't go undefeated, but we won TRU. Is that right, Luis?
That is correct. I believe we had the Reds joined by now. I think they dropped out of MLR.
Yeah, we beat Baton Rouge in that final. That was the one where
that was at Highlands.
No, it was at Burr.
Oh, at Blacks.
It was at Burr, and
that is correct.
Like first play of the game, their inside center knocked our inside center
Boudreaux
smooth out, just knocked him out cold. And we sent John Brazina on to replace Boudreaux, and he knocked their center out cold. They're like 2 minutes later.
Yeah.
So both starting 12s were out with concussions 5 minutes into the game.
That was a back and forth match too.
Yeah, that was a tough one. Baton Rouge was our big rival back then, and they had Heavy D and Mikey Linton and a bunch of those
South
guys.
Jeremy.
Yeah, a bunch of those guys playing, and they were our big rival in D2.
But the Huns are continuing to progress at this point. It sounds like, and you had some successful seasons the next season or two, and then you guys, as a group, decided that you wanted to step up and move back up to D1.
Well, it took a couple of goes at it. So we won TRU and went to nationals in Rhode Island in 04. Then 05 we lost at Lake Highlands against the Reds. Weezy, that's the one you're thinking of in the TRU final. And then 06 we beat Baton Rouge.
But we still advanced.
Went to South Carolina.
Yeah, but we still advanced at Lake Highlands.
Yeah.
It was the Reds and us, and we beat the heavily favored Baton Rouge for some reason. I believe we lost to them. Yeah, so we beat them on Saturday. And, I was thinking about that today, knowing that I was getting on this call. And, I believe they left a few other boys behind, and they were going to come in on Sunday to play the final. And, they still had some good boys playing, obviously. But, we managed to beat them. And I remember this one play, Craig Heyer and I always talk about, is we called Jackson Golden, which was basically 8 to 15 weak side, right? Something like that. 8, 9, 15, I think. And Craig comes up to me and he goes, "Hey, let's do Jackson Golden." And he goes, "But as soon as the winger and fullback approach me, then I'm going to chip over to the try zone and you go chase it." And so they obviously Baton Rouge had seen that play before, so they would mark Craig Heyer quite a bit. Play starts, happens. I mean, I kind of wasn't used to Kirk to higher passing or kicking for somebody else, So
Craig is pretty convinced he's the best option.
Yeah. So I kind of for a split second forgot that he was going to kick it, so I was kind of just trailing behind, and then I see the kick going. I'm going, oh shit! So then I'm on the inside going through, and I could hear Jeremy, their South African fly half, as he's playing in between both of us. By then, I've dusted both the centers, and he's just behind me going, "Fuck you, Weezy! I know you called that shit." Both Craig and I are just laughing, and it's a race from the fullback or the opposite wing to the try zone to touch that ball down. Well, needless to say, we dotted down, but it was such a good play that I think that's what kept the momentum for the rest of the game. And I mean, They were really, really bummed and all this, and it was great. And by then, at the end, both the Reds and us, lots of good mates on both sides, I would say, so that we made a hash of that evening, that night. And let's just say we both knew we were going to nationals.
Yeah, we shot ourselves in the foot on that Sunday. But so we won, 2 TRU championships in 3 years, went to nationals twice in 3 years. But D1 at that time.
We went to nationals 3 times, Kirk, because we went to South Carolina 2 years in a row.
No, just once.
Really?
Yeah, just once. That was the one where Zappa made God mad.
Well, what about when we lost to Atlanta that was
the same year. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we lost to Atlanta.
You kids at home, don't do drugs.
Yeah.
This is what happens when you do drugs, kids.
But D1 was falling apart, and Division I got down to they only had either 3 or 4 teams, and it was the Quins, the Blacks, and Houston RFC, I think. And USA Rugby had come in with a requirement that said, in order to be eligible for D1 nationals, you had to have a certain minimum number of games. And so we didn't move up in 06. We talked about it, but guys weren't feeling it, and the team had a vote and said, no, we're going to stay in D2. And then that 07 season was not that good. We wound up finishing like 4th. Shreveport really came on. Woodlands and Fort Worth really came on. And the union came and said, okay, somebody has to move up to, we're going to force somebody up to D1, because we have to have a minimum number of games and a minimum number of teams. So somebody's going to get forcefully promoted, but we'll offer it to anybody if they want to come up, give them an option first. And they went to the top team, which I think was Shreveport, and they said no. And then they went to Woodlands and they said no. And they went to Fort Worth and they said no. Then they got down to the Huns and the Reds, who were like 4th and 5th in the league that year in 07, at the end of 07, and said, how about you guys? And we both said, yeah, we'll do it. We'll move up to D1. And now you're looking at, the 2 Division I national champions, and to me, it's I get so frustrated with teams these days, and when it comes to promotion, they call it's just too much. We can't handle it. It won't be fair. And again, it's the difference is not as huge as people's minds make the jump much larger than it actually is.
Also believe at the time, I believe Woodlands had won a national championship at around 2001, 2.
Yeah, Woodlands and Fort Worth won D2 nationals back to back. Yeah, like 01 and 02.
Fort Worth the following year. So
yeah.
So
they were real solid teams.
D2 was pretty tough. I mean, I remember playing. I remember playing Woodlands. I don't think you were coaching yet. I think this was one of Terry's last games or something. And I mean, it was just, a track meet, 87-0, something like that. I mean, and Fort Worth. Oh, you were when we played in that ice storm in Fort Worth, you know, and
Yeah.
that's when they won the national championship that year.
Yeah.
Right.
No, they were strong teams. And
Yeah.
so but I just, people now, a team will go and go undefeated in D2 and then say, oh no, we're not good enough to go up to D1. And I'm going, man, the Huns and the Reds made the jump from middle of the pack in D2 to D1. And it wasn't easy. We didn't go, win the D1 league in year one. It took, and we had playoff games where we got beat by Aspen by 80, 90 points. And it was just, each year you get a little closer and a little more competitive, and you just keep plugging away, and you just work on getting better each year. You don't focus on, how much did we lose last week? It's how much better are we getting than what we've been?
Well, the real issue is numbers, these days. I mean, you really have to have a much larger squad to play a D1 or a D2 match, for that matter. I mean, there were no subs except for injuries when I played, when you started.
Yeah.
So if you had 17 guys, you could play. You got to have 23 guys, and the subs have to be strong to finish out a match. That's the one thing I would say that might be different. But
well, I think but you bring that up. That's a good point. That was one of the reasons that we wanted to move up, is because we had three sides of numbers, and the union wouldn't let us have, two D3 sides. So we took our third side and we made a whole new club and registered our third side as the Horde RFC. They were their whole different SIP roster, a whole new club. Said, okay, you won't let us have two sides in D3, but you can't stop us from creating another club. And we all trained together and we all played together, but we had one roster of guys that were technically a completely different rugby club. And we had to pay extra club dues to make that happen. But for us to then move up to D1 was a chance for us to get rid of that separate roster between D2, between our second and third teams, that limited our player movement and frustrated guys with ambition and made guys who got put on that third side feel like, oh, well, I'm not good enough. And, we really tried
a third
to
side being two D3 teams, because your first side was a D2 team.
Right.
To kind
so
of review,
moving up, let us expand and go D1, D2, D3. And so for us moving up, it wasn't just a competitive thing. It was, we needed to do that in order to keep the growth that we built and to keep growing. We had to have those opportunities for players.
So to kind of review the Huns history here for folks that
may I interrupt real quick?
Yeah, man.
Sure.
So Kirk, but then the story carries on with, once we got up to D1, we had our D2 and D3. Was that when we won the D3 TRU?
Yeah. The D3.
Was it that first year?
No, I think it was maybe the year after that, the second or third year after we went up to D1.
So, and obviously D3 was around, but yes. So
yeah,
I mean, that's
Anthony Arnold and Alex Lyles were playing for that state D3 team.
That is correct. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
And to Luis's point here, the Huns have won a D1 championship in TRU and a national championship, a D2 championship in TRU and beyond.
Several times, yeah.
And a D3 championship in TRU. We've won the TRU championship at every level.
I think us and the Blacks might be the only teams. I'm not sure the Reds have ever won a D3 championship.
I don't think so.
They've won a D2 final and a D1 final, but I don't think the Reds have ever won a D3 in Texas.
But everybody needs to let that sink in for a minute. The Huns have won TRU at all three levels. And again, just to review really quickly, in 72, there were two D1 sides playing under the Austin Rugby Club, the Golds. And the Golds are our founders. They won the Houston tournament and the Austin tournament that year. They were the de facto champions of Texas. And I was talking with Kirk, and I'd forgotten that in the old days, when they would list the Austin tournament champions, they would list the Austin Golds parentheses Huns. So even the blacks considered the Golds the precursor to the Huns. So in 72.
And that's where the 72 comes from, Bill, on the Huns founding, because I have a Austin tournament program with all the champions in the Austin tournament's history listed on it. And it says 1972 champion Austin Golds parentheses Huns.
So even though the first technical matches in a Huns uniform brought back from Argentina were in 73, that answers the 72 question. But champions in 72, the Huns, D1. Then we went through some ups and downs and made the playoffs as an open division D2 side in the early 80s, 82 and 83. Again, some ups and downs, and that team goes to wins TRU and goes to Shreveport in 93 or 94, whenever it was. Mm-hmm. So we've heard a lot about that team because of the Hall of Fame stuff. Then again, some ups and downs. And now we're talking about the resurgence of the undefeated team, a couple 3 TRU championships and playoffs appearances as a D2 side, a move back up to D1 and several playoff appearances there.
Yeah. In the space of 6 years, from spring of 2002 to spring of 2008, we went from 10 guys at practice and dead last in Division II to 3 sides and playing D1, D2, D3. And we did that in a 6-year span. And and in that 6-year span, a ton of the guys who were on that 2017 national championship team got their start with the Huns in that 6-year span. Robert Drummond, Matt Zappa, the Wellborn twins all came on during that 6-year period.
Well, and so of course we had the national championship season in 2017. We had a big cliff after that year because a lot of our players went pro, and Adam and Weezy and Hansel and a few others rebuilt our club the right way. Even though everybody wants to say it was unofficial, we were the best club on the table during the COVID year when people couldn't bring in all these ringers from New Zealand and everywhere else. We were top of the table that year in D1. And, not last summer, but the summer before that, we finished 5th in the National Sevens tournament with a bunch of overachievers really playing for each other and really playing together there. So I think it's really important for people to understand, we've had our ups and downs, but this period of 2002 to now that we're talking about really represents a resurgence of Huns rugby to this day. We still have 3 sides. We have a great youth program. We've had a lot of successes. We have a great social membership. We own the fields. And I really think you can look back to the early 2000s, Kirk, and track a lot of this success beginning at that point. Would you agree with culture and all these other things?
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I think we made a decision in 02, 03, 04, 05 that, we weren't going to be afraid of anybody, that we would play whomever. We'd play the Super League Dallas Harlequins as a preseason match every year. We'd play the Blacks even when we were in Division II every year. And we basically made a decision that, hey, we're going to play with anybody, and win or lose, we're going to go out there and we're going to give it our best shot. And I think that is, it's just a critical mindset that a club needs to have in order to grow and be successful. Is if you decide that there's a game of rugby that is just too hard and you don't want to play it, then something's off, you know.
Maybe you shouldn't be playing rugby.
Something's off,
saying.
you know.
Yeah.
Everybody just needs to say, hey man, if there's a game of rugby going on, I want to be in it. I don't care who we playing. I don't care, you know, how likely we are to win or lose. I don't care if it's a friendly or if it's a national playoff game. If there's a game of rugby on and my mates are around and we've got an opportunity to be in it, then let's go be in it. And that love for the game, that love for the challenge, it's what Julie McCoy calls a play up or challenge up mentality. You know, you just got to have it. It's critical.
Hey, Weezy, would you agree that the platform for a lot of the great things that I just listed that are going on with our club right now kind of got reinvigorated in that 02 season and we've built from there?
100%. And, you know, I mean, I believe there's a lot of taters still walking around in this club right now, running.
Yeah, that's true.
You know?
That's true.
So, you know, that's where we got it from. And, you know, it's good to see that we're still applying that and pushing that and, you know, going from there.
Yeah. And, you know, in that 02-03 season and the season after it, another thing that we didn't mention is there were a lot of guys who had gotten disillusioned and had drifted away and stopped coming out. Mm-hmm. And when the club started to have some success and started to change its mentality and to become more competitive, Sean Rutledge came out of retirement and came back to play. Mark Traeger came out of retirement and came back to play. Scuba, who hadn't been around, came back out to play. And you look at the last 20 years and you look at the role that some of these guys played, whether it was just for a short period of time or for the long haul, you know, would we be where we are today without those guys re-engaging? Right. I don't know, man. You know, you look at a guy like Sean, he's so impactful, and he'd basically hung it up. He'd gone off to pursue karate as his major hobby, and he'd hung up the boots, and he looked up and says, hey, you know, this is something that he might want to be a part of, and now he's still a part of it, you know, and that's big.
And not just that, I also think us, you know, being more serious about it and going to all these tournaments, playing the Blacks, playing the Quins, all that stuff, start winning D2 matches by, you know, good margins and being competitive and all that also starts attracting players that I don't think we'd ever would have gotten, you know, like, you know, like Caleb McLean moving down here, right? I mean,
Scott Green,
you know, Scott Green, you know, all these,
Craig Heyer.
all these other, yeah,
that's
exactly,
right, you young whippersnappers. Scott Green, the MLR rugby referee, was a Hun.
Yeah. So, you know, I think all that is what happened as well. You know, there's a lot of those things, you know, but, you know, it's just building good club culture.
Well, and, you know, I love hearing, I haven't heard the term tater before. I love that. But it's true. You look at Weezy, Scheidler, Hansel, to name three that were the fulcrum of rebuilding our club after we, you know, had a rough 2018 after the 2017 national championship, all taters.
I think Hansel joined in 04, maybe 05.
Well, and the point I was going to make is that Hansel was big on helping us kind of you know, state our mission statement of community culture rugby. And I know Kirk is big on that. And I was big on that because of Pat Lockridge. And, you know, Kirk came out to practice and I've told the story many times, throws a body block at Jay Rudd and thought we were going to kick him off the team his first day. And John Banks said, you're one of us now. Let's go to Nasty's and have a good time. That is other people passing this on to Kirk. And, you know, Kirk, you've told me several times that you use coaching rugby as a way to mentor young men. And I think that's really admirable. And that shows up in this community culture rugby philosophy that the Huns are still building around to this day.
Yeah. I didn't invent it. I mean, I'm doing what, influential coaches did for me, and whether it was Ebby Neptune, my high school football coach, or it was Brian Thornalley, a coach I had at the Blacks, or it was Bernie McCarty, a captain I had at the Blacks, or, hey, let's be honest, Alan Sharpley, who was my first coach at the University of Texas and then mentored me as an administrator. I didn't invent all this stuff. I'm taking the things that were impactful on me as a player and trying to express them in my own way and share them with a next generation.
And the young leaders on the Huns right now, our coaches and the young leaders on the Huns need to listen up, because you never know who you're going to impact. John Banks putting his arm around Kirk Tate and saying, "You're one of us now, stick with us," might have kept him in rugby at that time. And not only has he coached the Huns, played for the Blacks, he's been the TRU president for a number of years, and he's passing it on to other people. So you young guys, sit around, listen to some of these stories the old boys like Kirk tell, and pass it on. We're all in this together. Once a Hun, always a Hun. Weezy, anything else you want to say? We've been at this about, 50 minutes or so now, and Kirk and I could talk all night. Anything else you want to say? We're kind of losing you there in the darkness.
Yeah, nah, I mean, I think we've covered quite a bit, and it's really good to reminisce, and Kirk reminded me of a lot of stuff. Like you said earlier, don't do drugs.
Well, and guys, there's a reason Weezy is out at the field.
Yeah, Cam Mercer.
Yeah.
There's a reason Weezy is out at the fields every day, because he loves rugby and he loves this club, and he wants to pass on this incredible opportunity and foundation to you guys. There's a reason Kirk, even though he lives in Colorado now, is still the TRU president.
Nobody will take the damn job.
Well, and
nobody's taking my job either.
We got the virus, and it doesn't go away. We're infected. Kirk, any last words?
No, I think I've said enough, brother.
This is delightful. Heller and I are working on doing a Huns Oldcast Huns history thing at the upcoming Old Boys Day in just under 2 weeks, where we record a bunch of little vignettes from Old Boys and link them all together. So I asked all the old boys that are coming, think of one really good Huns story that you want told. That's
Be careful, Bill.
PG rated.
We had a guy who did that and made a film about it and broke up some marriages.
That's what I said, PG rated. But we're going to have some fun at Old Boys Day coming up on March 25th. That's literally in 12 days. So I'll be there. I know Weezy will be there. You coming in, Kirk?
I can't make it this time, man.
Well, see you at TRU Championships, Kirk, perhaps?
Might make it down for TRU Championships or Bloodfest.
Okay.
But I've got some house remodeling still to get done before family comes in for Passover first weekend in April. And getting down to Texas in the next couple of weeks isn't going to happen.
Well, you'll be missed. I know you'll be there in spirit.
I thought about it.
Of course you did. All right, fellas, it's great to talk to you. These stories are fantastic. And Weezy, great job on the barn. The Big Ten.
Mate.
Great job on the barn.
And I love that y'all call it the Big Tent.
Yeah.
All right. We're going to sign off now, and all there's left to say is Huns.
Huns.